What is up, SkinClub community? This is Elfishguy back once again with another exclusive video for you that you'll only find on the SkinClub platforms. Today we're going to be talking about the VRS problems that are arising in minor regions and what we can do about them. Now, when I'm talking about minor regions, obviously I'm primarily talking about Asia, which is my home region, being someone from ANZ. But I think this is also a problem that could crop up in the Americas region as well, depending on how the major invite slots play out. This obviously is largely influenced by the performance of each region's teams at the upcoming major. So right now, it's, I think, all good actually in the Americas region because you've got an even split between the two regions. But should there be a situation where there's, maybe 7 invite slots or something like that, then this could potentially come into play. So what am I talking about? Well, let's just jump straight into it because I think this is going to be a pretty long one. Now, you may have seen this tweet from Lynn over the last couple of weeks. I think it was about a week ago. They have some concerns about the VRS system and how it's impacting things in Asia. We'll just read the tweet and then we can go through it and have a bit of a chat about what is going on here and how we can potentially fix it. They say, guys, let's talk about the VRS system. 1 slot for each Asian region, and the VRS Asia ranked number 2 region gets the 4th slot. So for anyone that doesn't know, needs a quick little recap. We have 3 sub-regions in Asia, that being Oceania and SEA, Mongolia and West Asia, and China. Those are your 3 sub-regions. Each one of those sub-regions gets allocated 1 of the slots to the major. So these are 4 teams playing in each tournament, basically, each MRQ, and 1 of those teams goes to the major. Fair enough, that makes sense. However, the problems arise when Mongols have played so well that they are now bypassing all of this. They are going straight to stage 3 by being the best team in Asia, and also have gained an extra slot for Asia by their performances. So now we have 4 slots that we have to divide between 3 regions. And obviously anyone that's good at maths, which is probably not many of you, that doesn't divide easily, necessarily. So we have to find a way to bring that 4th slot to one of these sub-regions in a fair and equitable manner. The current way that is happening is the second best team from the region is going to get that slot then allocated to their sub-region. So in this current moment, that is Rare Atom. They're a Chinese team. Chinese MRQ is going to grab that second major slot. So there'll be 2 major slots for China, 1 for Oceania and SEA, 1 for Mongolia and West Asia, which is all good at the moment as far as I'm concerned. But we'll read on and see how things can be potentially construed in a negative light. Considering Mongolian teams and Oceania teams gained loads of VRS points from their local ranked event and may surpass all Chinese teams, which is a valid point. There's been definitely a lot more tournaments in Mongolia and Oceania that have been, I guess, region-specific for those 2 regions than there have been in China currently this year. I mean, the regional VRS... I've missed a bit, haven't I? Oh, no, I haven't. I mean, the regional VRS standing isn't representing the thing it's designed for. Teams farming points, climbing the rank by playing events that most other regions' teams are not able to. So basically, they're saying that these Mongolian and Oceania teams are able to get more points than the Chinese teams because they have tournaments to play in and the Chinese teams don't. Which I guess is fair and valid, but also it's kind of, it's a discussion point. We'll get into this a little bit later. This thing is going crazy due to the 4th slot distribution rule, which the more I looked into it, the more bizarre. We are afraid that other regions' TOs would try their best to boost their top-ranked team to become Asian number 2. This raises an interesting talking point. So they're basically saying, well, there's a world definitely where, let's use Australia as an example, the Defrag Invitational. If we would run 5 Defrag Invitationals and Simplify would win 5 Defrag Invitationals in a row, they might be the number 2 ranked Asian team without having played any other Asian teams. That's the concern. Rare Atom, currently the only Chinese team that can compete for the region's top team for Asia number 2. Tomorrow we will face them. This was now a week ago, by the way. If we win, China will get only 1 major slot because they would take points off of Rare Atom. If we lose, may be seen as match fixing. We'll get into that discussion in a sec. What shall we do? Does anyone don't know that Asian teams' life relied on major sticker income? So basically they're saying that Asian teams really rely on this sticker income, which is true. If you go back and look at Greyhound, the second that they didn't qualify for a major, they basically, that org closed, more or less. And then they were on their own, and eventually they got picked up by FlyQuest. But yeah, it's a very real problem for teams in Asia, is the income. Forfeit the game will cost our already no-match VRS points. What's your take? Let's talk about it. Okay, so ultimately, in the end, they went on to lose... they went on to forfeit that game. Essentially, quote-unquote, losing that game. They forfeit the game on purpose so that they wouldn't take points away from Rare Atom. You can see here, Rare Atom, 1,029 Valve points. And then the next closest right now is, well, Atox. They, I don't think, are going to count because they're currently disqualified by ESIC from pretty much every competition, and I can't imagine that doesn't go on to affect Asia as well in the MRQs. So let's talk Chinggis Warriors and Semperfi. Now, as we know, right now there's no extra games for Semperfi to be playing prior to the MRQs, as far as I understand. So they aren't necessarily likely to be overtaking Rare Atom, but there's a lot of tournaments happening in Mongolia. So something that that they're, I guess, concerned about Lynn Vision is that if Rare Atom get overtaken by Chinggis Warriors or any one of these 3 Mongolian teams, then that extra slot is going to go over to Asia, which obviously makes it much more difficult for Lynn Vision to qualify to the major here. It's a very competitive Chinese MRQ. Rare Atom, Tyloo, Lynn Vision, all about as good as each other at the moment. Debatably, at least domestically speaking, I think any one of them could beat each other and take that major slot. So if there was a second major slot, they would be feeling very, very happy about that, I'm sure. Makes it a lot easier to qualify for the major. So it's in Lynn Vision's best interest to not beat Rare Atom in order for Rare Atom to have as many points as possible going into this MRQ date, which will be the 7th of April, so in 4 days' time. As of the recording of this video, it's currently the 3rd of April. So why then is this system working this way? Well, this is obviously a problem, right? With Lynn Vision, they're basically incentivized to lose games. Okay, and any system which incentivizes you to lose games is going to be a little bit of a problem, I would say. Not only that, but also if you go back and look here, they are concerned about the possibility of being called match fixers. It's kind of a lose-lose, right? It's very much a lose-lose here for Lynn Vision. Either you play this game, which they obviously, as we know, ultimately went on to forfeit. You play this game and you win, in which case you take points away from Rare Atom, which directly affects your own self-interest in qualifying for the major, which is the most important tournament in the Counter-Strike calendar, especially for these teams that don't have a huge income, that rely on the sticker money. Or you go on, or in addition to that, you actually probably piss off all of China. Okay, China's a very proud country, let's say. They're very patriotic. Okay, China wants to promote China. Okay, Chinese people very much like to see China going well and doing well, which is the same for most countries, let's just say. So let's say Lynn Vision directly, negatively affects Chinese prospects going into this major. People are not going to like that. People are not going to be fans of Lynn Vision in China, for sure. So I don't know if you guys have ever seen, the Chinese internet sphere kind of going on a rampage, but it's not a fun place to be for these players if they're, having a bad performance or something like that. People are really shitting on them. So you can imagine the shitstorm that Lynn Vision would cause here if they would indirectly lose China a major slot. So I don't think that's a nice thing. Obviously, it's something that's going to be playing on the back of their minds as well. And then the alternative, obviously, is they go on and they lose to Rare Atom, where people will be like, okay, you're just match fixing because you're trying to give them more points. Maybe they just lost. Maybe they just had a bad day. But they lost. And now they're match fixers, according to, whoever. So that's another problem as well. So a lot of issues can arise here, unfortunately, for Lynn Vision. And it feels like you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you play and win, that's bad for you. If you play and lose, it's bad for you. And it's bad for you, especially because you're also going to be losing on VRS points, which you ultimately need going on down the track. So in the end, they decide to forfeit, which somewhat dodges the potential match-fixing allegations. It also means that Rare Atom, get the points out of that game. They then have to tank that VRS points, because now if you forfeit, you lose your VRS points. So overall, not a great result, unfortunately, for Lynn Vision. So what are the fixes here for a situation like this? Well, I guess at the end of the day, ideally, we would want it to be a LAN MRQ involving all of the teams from each region. We might have two Chinese teams, 2 Mongolian teams, 2 Oceanic teams, plus 2 MENA teams or something like that. Same way that we used to have minors. That never used to really be an issue. There was always a conversation, of course, about which slots were allocated to the minor, but it was kind of like, oh, well, there's one extra slot for MENA and one less slot for Oceania than what there should be, for example, something like that. And that's not really as big of a deal as, oh, we're literally giving an extra team a slot to the major. So either way, the big problem is obviously that teams are, in this current system, somewhat incentivized to play against their best interest, which is a really bad precedent to set, obviously with the possibility of throwing accusations and general messiness. But what are the other problems that are now arising and that are somewhat correlated to this? Well, again, if you've been paying attention, you can see that there is a few tournaments in Mongolia. Just have a look at the dates here. So bearing in mind that the cutoff for the invites to the MRQ and to the major and whatnot are the 7th of April. So this tournament finishes on the 6th of April, this is a Mongolia tournament. So let me just clarify. This is the Mesa Nomadic Masters qualifier. Okay, Mesa Nomadic Masters is a Mongolia tournament. that they're inviting a bunch of teams to, and obviously running qualifiers for Asia as well. So the Mongolia qualifier, which is a VRS ranked event, by the way, finishes on the 6th. The China qualifier is on the 7th and the 8th, so no longer impacts the VRS invites for the MRQ. The same for the Asia qualifier, it's on the 9th and the 10th of April. So they have essentially, whether by design or just by accident, given the Mongolian teams the opportunity to get more VRS points just prior to the cutoff. They've also run the Mesa Pro Spring Series, or whatever this is called, Mesa Pro Series Spring. That finishes today. So 2 10K Mongolia tournaments that finish just before the VRS cutoff. Obviously, you can read into that what you want. I'm not necessarily insinuating that they are doing this purely to boost the Mongolian chances in the VRS to sort of get that extra slot to the major. But if you were an unscrupulous TO, you could definitely be doing this. If I'm Jordan Elfishguy Mays, rich mega billionaire, and I want to see an Australian team go to the major, or multiple Australian teams go to the major, and I decide I'm going to run 3 $50,000 ANZ tournaments for ANZ only teams, everyone in Asia can get fucked, all of a sudden an ANZ team is going to be the number 1 VRS ranked team. And there's no question. And I'm not saying that's what Mesa is doing, but I'm saying the possibility of that being a thing is the problem with the system. Because now Mesa, people are throwing shit at Mesa, Chinese fans and even Lynn Vision, you can sort of see there, like, kind of implying that this is what is happening. And it's like, is that really what's happening? Or are they just running tournaments for their region? Like, one way or another, you just want to run tournaments for your region. Like, there's nothing wrong with that necessarily. They are the Mongolian Esports Association. They want to run tournaments for Mongolian esports. Okay? Just because there's a byproduct now that affects the rest of Asia and it affects Mongolia and China and ANZ and whatnot, why is that their problem necessarily? So what's the fix to this? Well, in an ideal world, all of these tournaments are Asia ranked. So, not just a Mongolia tournament. We would ideally want to have the Mesa Pro Series Spring be an invite tournament, which invites a couple of Chinese teams, a couple of Asian teams. And to be fair, they did do that. They ran the Mesa Asian Spring, the Mesa Asian Masters, which was the PGL Bucharest qualifier, I think. And that had Chinese teams. That had Oceania teams. So, you have to give some credit as well to Mesa. They are one of the TOs, one of the only TOs in the Asia region right now that is running tournaments that include all region teams. But of course, they are biased necessarily to have local tournaments as well. Say for Defrag Invitational, which was an ANZ tournament. I mean, that could very easily have included a couple of Asia teams, but it didn't, just because it's much more difficult to do that. So in an ideal world, we would have all of these tournaments be Asia tournaments, and that would kind of kill this issue. That would lower the possibility of teams being able to say, oh, this and that, based on, you've inflated your region's ranks by running tournaments. If all of them were just Asia tournaments, I mean, the same thing as well, you can go and talk about the Sky Esports event as well. There was a Sky Esports event, and now the Indian teams are kind of inflated in terms of their points. This is just the nature of the beast at the moment with the VRS system. Okay, we need to fix the VRS system, not necessarily shit on TOs that are running tournaments, because there's so few tournaments as it is in Asia that we want these tournaments to happen anyway. There just needs to be a better way of doing them. So in an ideal world, all of these tournaments include all of the Asia region, and then we have not only better competition, but we also have a better understanding of where each team is going to sit in relation to one another. I mean, go to the ranking here. Like, God's Reign, 814 points. They are technically one step behind the division, which, like, it's just in no world. There is no world where they're, like, God's Reign versus Rusa. I mean, maybe. I don't know. I think Rusa would win that. Personally, I think Rusa's a better team, for sure. So, it's just one of those things where, like, teams get kind of a little bit inflated. Like, GG Howe's 15 here. You can see GG Howe's 15. No world where GG Howe's losing to God's Reign. Absolutely not. So that's something that I would like to see happen. I don't know if that's feasible necessarily, but I think that's definitely the ideal world for Asia, is having all of these tournaments invite Asia teams. And to be honest, like, obviously this is quite cost prohibitive, but I think it's something that the teams kind of have to now take onto their own, on their own budget, right? TOs like Mesa, TOs like Defrag, TOs maybe like Sky Esports can potentially afford these kinds of things a little bit more so, but I know that these tournaments cost a lot to run. And I know that these tournament organizers aren't filthy rich. You know what I mean? So if we as a region want to have more tournaments which promote all of Asia, maybe we go back to a world where organizations are actually funding travel, organizations are funding accommodation. Okay, if Lynn Vision can come and play at Defrag Invitational, that's fucking sick. That's awesome. Okay, it's good for ANZ teams because they get to play against the better competition. It's good for Lynn Vision because they get international travel experience and LAN experience and VRS points potentially as well. So let's try to make that happen. Anyway, there's more problems. The HOTU situation, which is this one. I don't know if anyone cares about this, but it's a potential problem. As you can see, HOTU are not going to be invited to the Asian qualifier. So most of you, I'm sure, can't read Mongolian, but basically what this says on Instagram is that ESN reached out to Blast. ESN are the TO that's running the MRQs in Asia. And they've reached out to Blast to basically ask Blast to put HOTU into the EU MRQ rather than into the Asia MRQ. Why is this a problem? Well, it depends on which side of the fence you sit on. Maybe it's good. If you don't think HOTU is an Asian team, then they should be playing in EU. And they are 3 Russian players and 2 Kazakhs. So there is a debate to be made there. But as we know, the precedent has been set that the players from Far East Russia have played through Asia. We saw GR Gaming in the last RMR. They were playing in the Asia RMR, even though Russia is Europe, I guess, technically. So this is where you get into murky water. You get into a bit of a grey area. And even if we scroll down a bit here, you can see Mo, who is the coach of HOTU, said that's not true. So basically, I think there's a bit of a question mark over this one. Is HOTU an Asia team? Well, they've been playing in Asia tournaments for the better part of, the last few months. I don't know where they came from. They popped up like only a couple of months ago. The first thing I saw from them was the Mesa Asian Masters, which they won. Or no, sorry, they came second. And then they won the most recent PGL qualifier. I can't remember which one that was for. But they won the PGL qualifier. So they came second in one PGL qualifier, they won another PGL qualifier, both being the Asia qualifier. So they have been playing in Asia. So if they are an Asian team and they are playing in Asia, should they not be playing in the Asia MRQ system? Potentially, yes. Or are they a European team that's trying to take advantage of Asia invite slots and just playing in these Asia tournaments when it is convenient to them? I don't know. But this is, again, like that gray area where it's like, well, where do they sit? Same thing with Liquid. It's like, technically, they could be Asia. Technically, they could be North America. What's the solution here? Well, ideally, at the start of each major cycle, I think you should have teams go, okay, we're going to be an Asia team. And then you're locked into playing in Asia tournaments for that 6-month period. And no one's going to choose to play in Asia if they're not an Asia-based team. Because that would be ridiculous. You would lose opportunities to play in Europe if you're a European team, or North America if you're a North American team, or whatever. And no one would willingly do that because those other regions have more opportunities. And you're, to be honest, already kind of soft locked into playing in your region anyway. Look at what happened to Talon. They were an ANZ core. They wanted to play in Europe. They weren't allowed to play in Europe because they weren't getting invites, basically, because they're not an EU VRS team, even though they were living in EU, because they were living in Malta. They were only able to play in ANZ or /Asia tournaments because of their Asia core. So why are we not just sort of making that actually a thing and saying, all right, at the start of each major cycle, every team's going to nominate their region, Valve or someone, whichever TO is running that particular major is going to go through and say, okay, yep, you are a team from Asia. I can see that you've got 3 ANZ players, or in this case, you've got 3 Far East Russia players and 2 Kazakhs. That classifies you as an Asia team. Fair enough. Now you play in all the Asia tournaments. You play in the Mesa Asia Masters or whatever. You play in Defrag Invitational if an Asian team gets invited, for example. It all has to come down from the top. That's the problem, and I think there's not enough direction just yet coming through from the top. So, is it right? Is it fair that they're forced to play in Europe if they've been playing in the Asia quals? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. It really depends on which side of the fence you're sitting on here. I don't really have enough information as to exactly where they live. For example, again, you could have a team from Russia that says, yeah, we're a Far East Russian team, but they're actually not. And they're just playing in Asia tournaments trying to farm Asia. That's a possibility as well. And that's not fair on the Asia teams. But if you are genuinely a Far East Russian team and you are playing in Asia for the 6-month period prior to the MRQ, I think you should get to play in the MRQ that's in Asia. I don't know if that's unreasonable, but that's my take. Anyway. What about ESL Challenger League? This is technically not counting to the VRS ranks right now. Lynn Vision's 20-2. And they're not getting any points out of that. Tyloo's 17-3. Tons are 16-4. Okay, and God's Reign, again, I'm picking on God's Reign a little bit, I know. And it's not, I don't hate God's Reign or anything like that. It's just that they're a good example of why this system is a little bit flawed. God's Reign is 6-16. Okay? And they're like 20 points behind Lynn Vision, who are 20-2. Are these two teams on the same caliber? No, not really. And we know that. I can watch the game and I can say they're definitely not the same team. Or not even close to the same team. So why is God's Reign at that position where they're almost as good or better. At one point, they were higher than Lynn Vision on the rankings until I think Lynn Vision played these extra calls. And it's just a bit silly. So what can we do about the fact that ECL doesn't get the VRS points until the end of ECL, which is like a 3-month-long tournament? This doesn't finish until... Where's the final? I don't know. There. July. 11th of July. So it's still another month. And you've got all of these games from Asia that have been played. All these games. Look at all these games. And they don't count. Look at all these games. This is the way that Asian teams get their VRS points. And it doesn't count. So, anyway, something should be done about that. I think you should have maybe somewhere halfway through the season a VRS update, or 1/3 of the way through the season, and then 2/3 of the way through the season. At least then you're getting like some chunks of points coming through from this event, which realistically should be, and I understand why that system is in place with the whole Gamer Legion thing, where a team gets knocked out, they get their points, and then they get invited to the next tournament, even though other teams are still competing in the same tournament. Something needs to be changed about that, especially in Asia, because this is like the only way that teams can get their points. So that's important as well. Now, here's the one thing that's going to be a little bit crazy. Would it not be better? This is people are probably going to get mad about this. Would it not be better to split the world into 4 regions instead of 3? Right now we have Europe, Americas, and Asia Pacific. What if we added MENA to that? And just took one of the Asia slots and put it into MENA? Because, first of all, there's all these issues that are arising in Asia because of the ping with MENA. Okay, teams are now having to play all these international tournaments. Okay, we're having ANZ teams playing against Middle Eastern teams. Okay, we just saw Semper5 versus Chihao. I don't think either team really enjoys that situation where they're playing on like 100 plus ping, potentially. There's not really a good... Like, ANZ can play Asia on Guam, and that's kind of okay. But as far as I understand, MENA can't play on Guam, so they have to play on Singapore. In which case, that's worse for ANZ. And kind of like almost getting into the position where it's unplayable. It's just very, very difficult. I think if we would have MENA be its own region and Asia Pacific be its own region, that may start to fix some of these issues where we don't have all these stupid international qualifiers that are including all of these regions. But that would then, obviously mean that TOs have to allocate a slot to MENA, allocate a slot to Asia, allocate a slot to Europe, allocate a slot to the Americas. People are going to say, well, the MENA teams aren't good enough. Well, it's like, okay, sure, but also a couple of the last Asia-based tournaments, we actually saw MENA teams do it really well. XO Esports won Extremesland, which is a MENA team, against some pretty good competition. Tyloo was there, Rare Adam was there, Semper5 was there. A lot of the top ANZ teams, a lot of the top Asia teams currently were beaten out by XO. Chihao have done very well recently in a lot of these qualifiers. They're beating Semper5 on the reg. They have been able to outplace teams like Rare Adam. So are they not good enough? Are they not good enough to have their own region? I don't know. You can't say that without saying that maybe Asia's not good enough as well. So anyway, there's a lot of stuff to think about. This is probably a lot longer than it should have been. 23 minutes already. But I think the fixes that I would like to personally see, just to wrap this up, are, look, in an ideal world, MRQs go from being online back to LAN. That is the most simple fix that fixes all of this. I don't know that that's going to happen. That has to be mandated by Valve, because TOs aren't going to take that cost onto themselves without it being a forced expense, as we've already seen. They're going to run it online if they can. And online is just not as good. So if we could have it be back to an 8-team LAN where you're inviting 2 MENA teams, 2 China teams, 2 rest of Asia teams, which is obviously basically Mongolia, and 2 Oceania teams. Boom. Then we have our 4 slots, and those 8 teams play out for those 4 slots, and okay, if 2 Chinese teams and 2 Mongolian teams go through, nobody can be mad. If we have to play it online, let's think a little bit more about how we are allocating these slots, whether or not maybe we should have even an extra sub-region for MENA, or just, change that whole system entirely. And again, in an ideal world, let's have more Asia-based tournaments. That would be the dream. I think that would fix a lot as well. But this is all wishful thinking. These are just my thoughts. Hope you've enjoyed it. If you want to hear more stuff like this, stick around, because we're going to be dropping another video or 2 on the SkinClub platforms. Myself, Pilsky, and Blair are going to be recording an MRQ preview for you guys in about a week or so. So you can watch that one then. And hopefully things are going to be better for Asia in the near future. But that's all from me today. Hope you enjoyed. See you in the next one.